The Rib Witch. It was a bitterly cold November day, the type where all a body wants to do is curl up on the couch with a blanket, a book, and a hot cup of tea. Or more accurately, a box of tissue, a handle of Old Crow, and a porno. But semantics aside, it was not freezingly cold out. As I finished Chapter 1, Bonnie's a naughty girl who deserves to be arrested, I realized I should probably shut the drapes. The 11-year-old boy across the street wasn't so much sledding as he was staring. With the drapes securely closed, I returned to the couch for Chapter 2. Unfortunately, my book started skipping, which is odd as I've gotten a lot of books from Dumpster Pete and never had this problem before. As an aside, they call him Dumpster Pete because he can usually be found by a number of dumpsters in a few select alleys around town, not often frequented by police or persons with a shredded dignity. Needless to say, after a few minutes of trying to get my book to work right, I wasn't hard up for the task as I had been. Slightly flustered, I stopped, a cold realization seeping into the annals of my mind. I would be forced to use my imagination. Sat back down on the couch to finish my book, but without my book. I sat and sat, waiting for the images to come, but none did. My goodness gracious, I thought. Somewhere along the line I actually killed my imagination. I sat, my fervor visibly waning, and reflected. The internet was down. With no on-ramp and no book to read, there was nothing much to distract me from the solitude of the cramped trash heap formerly known as my apartment. To avoid spiraling into the clutches of maddening boredom, I would have to go out and interact with humanity. Thankfully, I had a vague idea of what this task might entail. I took a belt of Old Crow for courage and strode across the room to the closet to don my tracksuit. Clad in clothing, I left the domicile. The 11-year-old watched me all the way down the block. It was a little disconcerting. Some people need to be taught to mind their own business. But soon I turned the corner. The weight of his judging wonderment disappeared from my shoulders. Walking in the cold sure makes you work up an appetite, I thought. Did I really think it, or was it the delectable sight of those grease-laden golden arches which informed me it was time to eat? We may never know. I stepped through the door. Warmth reached out and wrapped its tentacles around me in a reassuring embrace. Tentacles, that reminds me of another book I need to read. Anyway, I stepped to the counter, lulled to sleep by the soft kisses upon my cheek, courtesy of the heat vents overhead. And then it happened. The most hideous witch costume I'd ever seen turned from the fry vat to wait on me. Good God, I said, Halloween's over. The gnarled excuse of a subhuman stared at me from glazed-over eyes.
It sure is,
she responded. Then why do you still have your costume on?
What costume?
You're wearing a witch costume.
No, I'm not.
Her answer was plain and as honest an answer as an orc can manage. I think the utterance of truth burned her skin a little as she spoke. I threw up a tad in my mouth. That barely audible yet completely awful sound must have been an actual word in troll, because the beastly thing behind the counter bared her teeth in a hideous display and said,
A rib sandwich.
In retrospect, it may have been an attempt to smile, but the sheer evil within her soul warped it beyond recognition. I stood rooted to the spot, the ramifications of this development too monumental to be processed in a timely fashion. The beastly troll of a female entity returned to the counter with a mashed box, so contorted I thought it was a crumpled paper. But then the bright red sauce started to ooze from the corners. This wasn't food. It was clearly some sort of demonic birthing from the witch's teat. What the hell is that? I couldn't help myself. The orc's head snapped up, a stray bit of green snot falling from her nose right onto the spawn of Satan she expected me to eat.
Your rib sandwich, sir.
I stared, too disgusted to disagree. With surprising dexterity, the wart-covered fingers flipped the lid open. Lettuce and onions spewed from the orifice, along with copious amounts of thick red ick in what can only be described as the aftermath of vegetable genocide. Amidst the pale green, white, and red wreckage, an island of seed-covered buns stood out as the only semblance of food. I watched a creeping red twinge crawl up through the bread as it absorbed the sticky atrocity this heathen was trying to pawn off as barbecue sauce. The weathered hag flipped the lid shut. She pushed the box across the counter toward me. I took a step back, my disgust written in bold across my face. I turned on my heel, long strides swiftly carrying me in the direction of the door.
Burma, Giuseppe.
The troll voice rang out clear and strong. A chill shot down my spine. Iron blinds slammed down in front of the door and all the windows. 2 large green hands, complete with unkempt nails, wrapped around my arms. They stopped me in my tracks and held me.
Let me see him.
The ugly voice commanded from somewhere behind the counter. A sickness grew in my stomach as the 2 walking tree trunks, smelly and drooling, rotated me to face the witch. She tilted her head to the side, a sharp cracking sound coming from her neck. Her head spun in a slow 360-degree circle. I couldn't see her putrid eyes when her head was turned, but I'm sure her gaze never left me. With blithe agility, she leapt over the counter, scooping up the box of toxic waste as she came.
You will try this sandwich.
She informed me in a throaty audibleization more befitting the Prince of Darkness than a worker in the fast food industry. I clenched my teeth and clamped my lips shut. She stopped a foot from me. Our eyes locked. A malevolent smile crested the evil being's features.
You will try this sandwich.
She roared in maniacal delight, trailing off into an ear-piercing cackle. She vigorously stomped her feet rapidly against the floor as if she were running, her head tossing to and fro like a crazed child basking in the droplets of an unseen sprinkler. But she wasn't running. At least I was partially sure, because logically, if she were running, she would plow right into me, which she hadn't, I don't think. But the room was so dark, and the laughter so nauseating, I couldn't be sure. And then there was the smell. Rotten decades of hygienic neglect emanating from the witch, while layers of dried ogre sweat and rancid drool lingered in a permanent cloud around the monsters that held me. And through it all, mixing with and then dethroning all other putridity, was the rib sandwich, that sweet fake barbecue smell, twisting the other odors into new shades of demonic horror within my nasal cavity. I retched, a greenish-yellow cascade arching out over and then splashing down on the rapidly stomping shoes. The stomping stopped. Her cold, lifeless eyes drifted to mine. Everything froze for a second. I became aware of the soft hissing sound drifting out of her vocal cords. I bucked against the strong, inhuman grip of my restrainers. They subdued me, exuding noisy, slurping grunts with their effort. The witch stepped closer, grizzled strands of visibly dirty hair hanging in front of her face. I shrunk from her, my face the definition of terror. Her lips parted into a pernicious smile, revealing jagged shards of teeth discolored by death to a shade akin to black. So transfixed was I on her ghoulish features I did not see her needle-like forefinger and thumb rising beside my face. They swooped down on my nose, catching it in a crushing pincher grip. I tried to twist away to no avail. With bird-like quickness, the witch snatched the atrocity from the box, letting the mangled cardboard clatter to the floor amidst a hailstorm of lettuce and onion.
Now, my precious, you dine.
The witch was only inches from my face, the dry ash-like wind of her breath pulling the moisture from my skin. I clamped my mouth shut tight.
How long can you go without breathing?
She whispered in what I presume was meant to be a seductive voice. Nothing short of hideous. I still refused to open my mouth. The grimace of a smile faded from her face. Victory! The thought flashed through my mind. How wrong I was. The witch drew back her hand. She pummeled my lips with the sandwich. Sauce oozed out onto my face with the first blow, smeared with the second. The third application of blunt force drove thick red stickiness into the crevices of my sealed nose. I protested violently, trying to scream without opening my mouth. A fourth and fifth attempt to mash the thing into my closed orifice ground the sauce into my skin like a vile lotion which should never be applied. I bucked against the grip holding me, but could not break it. I could not breathe, but refused to open my mouth. The bludgeoning continued. I felt a chink develop between my lips. The witch saw the fear on my face. Her pace grew frantic. She leapt out of her shoes onto my torso, digging the vicious talons on her back feet into my skin. My lips separated. A putrid taste gripped the end of my tongue. In the next second, it was inside my mouth, the witch cramming and holding it there, not allowing me the chance to spit it out. I tried to fight it with my gag reflex, but with every effort, more sandwich found its way in. I was choking. This was it, death by sandwich. Trying desperately to move air, I choked and bucked and twisted and growled, and finally I swallowed. The sweet kiss of tasteless ash slid down my gullet. The weight of the non-food sat heavily in my stomach, sapping me of my will to fight. The witch threw her head back and cackled demonically. My restrainers let go. I slumped to the floor, insentient, hollow, no longer of this world. I could feel the transformation shrieking through my veins, like 10 million hollow, undead beings reveling in the taste of my waning soul, trying desperately to reclaim their own essence. I don't know how long the internal feeding lasted. Thankfully, the fever took me and I sunk into a mostly unremembered delirium. Now I am awake and fine. Well, not really fine. I have no soul. Feel an unending hollowness continuously growing inside me, and am well aware that in a short time I will be consumed by an unslakable evil. That is the reason I feel compelled to write this as a warning to whomever may find it. Do not, under any circumstances, eat the rib sandwich. It is a harbinger of transformation, a soul-stealing tool contrived by the devil himself, and distributed to the masses to convert legions of humans into an army to fight an eternal war. One more thing before the change consumes me. If you are reading this, you should know, somewhere in the shadows of this decrepit domicile, I am lurking, waiting, my sole purpose to feed upon your flesh as you vainly scream.